Hey everybody! So it is time for another foot reading video. We had more pictures submitted within the Foot Reading and Reflexology online community on Facebook, and everybody is really enjoying these videos. If you are interested in foot reading, join the community, and these videos are also teaching tools for you all to learn the art and science of foot reading if you are interested in that. Reflexology theory. We have a lot of mentorship going on in that group, and this is where your challenge is coming from. So hope you enjoyed the video, and without further ado, this is live, so when I do these, I will be kind of looking at the comments and responding as is. So definitely follow and ask questions if you're on, and we will talk throughout the video. But for now, screen share. Okay. Here we are. F5. Excellent. Okay. So here is our foot reading video. And the interesting thing about these feet is we have not only a younger pair of feet, but we also have some new markers and some returning markers that I've already talked about in previous videos, but then also some new ones like we haven't been able to talk about, specifically some things that we can see just in this photo alone. So lots of very interesting stuff happening in this foot reading video. All of you who seem to be jumping on right now in the chat, thank you so much. I appreciate you very, very much. I know this is spur of the moment. I don't schedule these, so thank you all for jumping on. I can see the view count rising. So foot reading, this is where we are really going to jump into a couple different topics about what these feet represent, how I would treat this person as a client, and what things I would suggest to really help them understand not only how their body is interconnected and how I can see that through the feet, but also this idea that we can then tailor their lifestyle based on what the body is saying. Okay, so as a reminder, these pictures are coming from the conversation that we're having in the foot reading and reflexology online community. That is where all of this is going down on Facebook. So many people have joined that group recently. I think we're about to break 600 soon. It's just such a fantastic community of reflexologists and foot reading enthusiasts from all over the world. We share pictures and stories and questions, and it's just amazing. So that's where all this is coming from, if you were wondering. First, we're going to go over what I see in terms of the markers that I personally would pick out. Then we're going to go over what I would say and also what I would not say, which is sometimes much more important. Again, when we think of foot reading and foot reading being a consultative approach, it's the concept of we are not trying to diagnose, prescribe, or treat. We are not going to DPT, but instead we are always aiming to ACE, or assess, coach, and educate. And that is the philosophy that we are trying to promote here with this craft. Then, most importantly, we're going to talk about what do you do about it. So after the reading actually takes place, we're going to discuss, hey, now that we found the markers and we understand what they mean and we've conveyed that to the client, how do they move forward in a way based off of what we said that is both easy to do, which is going to be really important for us to discuss during this one, and is beneficial and guided by the information that we've kind of gleaned from the extremity. So all of this is super important, and that's what we're going to focus on in this video. So follow along and let's get to it. First and foremost, we have this slide. There are 3 points that I wanted to talk about before we get going. With these feet specifically, we are going to focus on the red flags. And what I mean by the red flags is I mean when the body chooses to produce a marker that is so big, red, and hairy, and it doesn't need to literally be big, red, and hairy, but this concept of when you look at the feet, you just cannot help but look at these various markers because they are so in your face. Those are the red flags, the things that your eyes are constantly coming back to. And that's really how we develop the top of our top three, the top three markers that we would focus on, but also the top three kind of things that we would share with our client. And really it goes from like grossest to not grossest is the best way to say it. So understanding what those red flags are and how they play a role within the session. Then we're going to go into tempering your words. This is going to be very important because there are some pretty dramatic markers in here. And so I'm going to emphasize how I would sugarcoat the words a little bit, not necessarily to the point of total dilution, but this idea that the client doesn't need you to be so up in their face and so blunt and so sharp with your verbiage. Instead, especially as we're going to talk about in this case, tempering the words, rounding them off, making them softer is going to be the approach that I personally would like to suggest. Then compliance. So what I mean by compliance is methods of balancing the suggestions that we make at the end of every foot reading, as far as how somebody can move forward with the information that we've talked about. What you suggest has to be doable, and it has to be likable, and it has to be kind of fathomable in their eyes. So if you tell a client, hey, go drink more water, but they're like, I don't drink water, which is a terrible example, but common actually. When clients say, oh, I don't think I could drink any more water, or I don't like water, or like I have an herbal background, I don't really do tea. I don't really like the taste of various herbs, all of that is compliance. So when we think of how we are going to tailor the suggestions to the client at hand so that they actually do them, that is compliance territory. So just making sure that that's a big part of our discussion as well. Okay, so let's get into these feet. These feet are amazing because we have a high concentration of markers in one particular zone. Can you guess what zone it is? Pause for processing. Okay, so first marker that we see is marker number 1, the blackened toenail, which oddly enough may or may not have been caused by an actual injury. And some of my clients, when I tell them that, they're like, what do you mean may or may not have been caused by an injury? I said, exactly what I said. Because sometimes I know I've experienced this, but my clients have experienced this as well. Without any trauma to the foot whatsoever, a nail will just go black, or a little spot will appear without there needing to be a change of shoes or a bumping of a toe or anything of that nature. And whenever we see something like this, specifically on the big toe and specifically a change of color like this, we can even see the nail has been slightly cracked or is slightly shedding on that right side. It indicates mental trauma. Now, mental trauma is a very strong word, and we definitely don't want to violate scope of practice. So the way that we would sugarcoat that is we would talk about there has been significant mental stress. Okay. So, but however, when we see the feet go black and blue, that is literally what is happening both in the physical reflexes and in the internal state. The person has been beat up, not in the literal sense like somebody jumped them, but in a traumatizing sense. Okay. So I treat these markers with a very, very serious respect. And when I see the nails displaying this particular color, it means that this person has had quite the blow to the psyche. Okay. Now, for those of you who are my students who are taking my online course, we're going to talk about this idea of zooming in. So when you zoom in to the nail of the big toe, you will notice that this marker is gridded in vertical zone 1, horizontal zone 2. Now, for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. You'll learn about it in time. Go back, watch the other videos. We talk about zooming in. It's perfectly okay. Don't freak out. But this means that specifically the mental trauma has seriously affected the emotions. And oddly enough, we are going to find multiple markers to back that up on the plantar view of the feet. So just kind of keep that horizontal zone 2, that emotional state, that emotional zone top of mind as we go forward through the reading as well, because it's not just a horizontal zone 1 issue. It's seriously affected horizontal zone 2, and we'll see that as we go. But here's another interesting kind of way to look at this. This is all on the top side of the feet. And when issues are on the top side, they represent not only the back of the body, but also how the world sees us. So this is what is being displayed. This is how this person has physically been perceived by the outside world as damaged. would be the best way to say it. So no way that they could have kept this hidden. And so we see the marker manifesting on the dorsal surface as opposed to it just being underneath. Okay. So marker number 2. I know that some of you picked this up right off the bat, and especially in the Facebook group, you guys were really harping on this. So this is an interesting marker. They are not blisters. They are a cleaner form of callus. Since it's on the right foot, absolutely, Adam, gold star for you. And we are going to talk about that more as we progress through the video. This idea that most of the markers are on the right side. And again, that'll become clearer, especially as we get into the plantar surface. So back to this callusing. This callusing is clean, like it's shiny, which is why it gets that blistery appearance, but it is still a callus. It is still an overgrowth of tissue. Now, here's the interesting thing about this marker particularly is it's on what I would call the occiput reflex, or bear with me, those of you who don't know foot anatomy, I'm going to throw out some 50-cent words, but it is on the interphalangeal joint of the distal and proximal phalanx of the big toe. And that space, that interphalangeal space between those two bones, if we think of the distal phalanx, the big toe kind of pat and nail as the head space, and then the proximal phalanx as the neck space, that callus is right on the edge of those two spaces. And that means that there's some serious calcification of tissue happening around the occiput. Now, this could manifest in a couple ways. Headaches probably being the most common, but also could be sleeplessness, could be allergies, which we're going to hit on in a couple other markers as well, especially with that right side big toe injury. That could also be a sign of sinus issues or impacted head space as well, maybe even dental trauma. Interesting interpretation there. But when we think of this callus building on the occiput, that back of the head space has just gotten so constricted and so fibrous, would be the best way to say it, that it's really starting to affect the alignment of the joints. We can also see that really sharp slash underneath it. So very common when an issue starts to form that earth infection, that calcification, there's a corresponding area of equal and opposite weakness. So that earth and that air kind of duking it out because the tissues are being scattered, basically, okay, due to what I believe is that past trauma. Now, mentally and emotionally, whenever we see a callus or any sort of growth, which we're definitely going to talk about on the plantar surface as well, I'm hinting because it's just, everything comes together when you see the plantar surface. And then when we think of this growth, this overgrowth, especially since it's so neat, it's so circular, it's so encapsulated, vertical zone 1, horizontal zone 1, the big toe space represents our mind and how we express it. So when we see on both sides this really clear bottling up of what would be the energetic words that this person has been holding on to, that is the direct interpretation mentally and emotionally of this reflex, is they have literally just been biting their tongue this entire time and holding back everything that they have wanted to say. So really interesting marker, both from a physical and a mental emotional perspective. All, again, I'm going to weave back into that past mental trauma. Okay? So that is our second marker. Marker number 3. Let's talk about this space and this toe specifically. And here's where we get into a little bit of issue between right and left. Again, this is a right side marker, but we can definitely see on the left side how the toe has gone through the same warping, but it doesn't look as bad. And that could be the lighting, but I'm really going to pick on this because we also see the separation of the big toe and the second toe. So separation of big toe and second toe is the mark of the overthinker, which confuses some of my students. And what I mean by that is when the big toe, which represents the head space, and the second toe, which represents the influence of the heart space, separate or get space in between them, it's this kind of mental isolation that occurs normally in people with very strong minds, who have a very active imagination, who often need to come compartmentalize their emotions because they get too intense, this separation allows them to do that. So it's sharp, almost over so, and so they start to isolate their emotions, their mental state, and compartmentalize and rationalize in order to be able to survive the trials of life. Okay, so the mark of the overthinker. But here's what's also interesting about this is with the second toe literally looking like it's being pushed aside, the second toe being pushed aside is very significant. And we can also see, especially around the interphalangeal spaces, this bubbling occurring around the joints. And that also lets me know that when it comes to expressing their feelings this time, because it's vertical zone 2, there is so much bottling up that's happening. We can even see that in the fifth digits as well, that interphalangeal joint, that spongy kind of bubbling that's happening. So this person is really having trouble with their words, getting out what they want to say, feeling comfortable saying it, and all just because there's so much to be said from what we're already seeing. So that will definitely factor into the later advances in the reading club. So let's talk about those. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to look at the plantar surface. And I am so thrilled to bring you this plantar surface picture because it makes everything crystal clear. Often when we see the dorsal surface, we see how the world is perceiving this person, but we only get half the story. So here is the real scoop. Bam. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? I mean, there is some stuff up in here. So, okay. Now, real quick, before we get into what I'm going to find, I'm going to point out what I don't want to focus on. I don't want to focus on the digestive reflexes. Yes, there is lining, especially in horizontal zone 3, and there is dryness in horizontal zone 4, not nearly to the degree that I would like to see in order for it to be a serious marker. Christopher just jumped on. Love your videos. Thanks so much. Love you too. And so not going to focus on the digestive space. Also, something to point out, the lighting is very different from one side to another, so that's going to affect the interpretation a little bit as well. But there are some clear things that we can see. One of those not necessarily being, but still kind of important, is we can see the proximal head of the fifth metatarsal halfway down the outside of the foot has gotten rather swollen, indicating some knee issues. But horizontal zone 5 at the heel, although it is slightly calloused, is not experiencing cracking or dryness. So all things that are relevant and that some of you pointed out within the group, but not things that I personally would focus on. Adam just jumped on again. Is that a wart on the right foot? Yes, Adam, it is. So let's talk about this wart. Oh my God. Okay, so that was really dramatic. Sorry. So when we think of this wart, another earth marker. So we've already seen so many earth markers in this person already. And here we have not just one wart, but I'm seeing 3. So you can see one slightly below it and then slightly above it, dangerously close to the pituitary gland reflex as well. So what this starts to paint the picture of is past emotional bottling with potential shoulder impingement. So in horizontal zone 2 as well, in vertical zone 5 in line with the fifth toe, there is that callousing that's happening around that shoulder joint reflex. And all of these earth markers just really tell us that, especially in the past, this person has just been so bottled and so internally pressurized, very much pressure cooker syndrome. Like there's just been physical things in the chest lung space that have needed to be released but have not been released. Everybody's laughing at my overdramatic comment, so thank you all. But back to the markers. When we start to observe warts, so warts are an overgrowth of tissue. They do tend to take on, for me personally, a much more mental emotional spin to the discussion because they are so singular, because they are so pronounced, and because they are a viral infection. And viral infections do not surface lightly. Okay, so unless it's a cluster, if it's a single wart like this one, it definitely tells me X marks the spot. This is where the issue is. This is where everything has literally started to build up and calcify and needs to be kind of opened and spread. Likewise, if we wanted to think of that callousing on the shoulder joint, same thing, indicating that binding of the right shoulder. So potentially a right side shoulder injury or right side shoulder pain. And I'm also going to throw in there potential immune suppressant and allergy issues. Why? Because as I was looking at these feet, I couldn't help but think that this wart is very dangerously close to the thymus reflex. And I'm thinking that if this is a younger person and maybe they had a weird hormone situation where like they were just sick straight for 6 months, that could also be what the wart represented as well. So I was just kind of really intuitively feeling that, but just something off topic that I thought I would throw in as a possible interpretation, as well as with that potential wart over the pituitary. Lots of hormone infringement starts to paint me a picture of like growing pains, which normally manifest as like in and out sickness. Okay. But what I put down here at the very end of marker number 4 is Atlas complex. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Greek mythology, Atlas is the man with the world on his shoulders. And that is very much what I'm seeing here with all of the markers that we saw on the dorsal surface, with all of the markers that we're seeing on this right side past. There is so much bottling and so much internal compartmentalizing that's happening here, and we really need to kind of personify that. And so that idea of Atlas, this person has really just taken on way too much to burden. But as Adam was saying, all of these things are right foot. So we are seeing so much right foot activity. There is so much past stuff that is not being processed, versus when we look at the right or the left side, you can see that vertical callousing slash in line with the second toe, but the wart is not present. Adam says it's hard to see. Is there another bump brewing between vertical zone 1 and 2? I'd say yes. That's the other wart that I picked up on. But on the left side, that vertical kind of lightning bolt, very Harry Potterish slash, that isn't as dramatic as the wart that we're seeing. So, you know, we can even see maybe a little bit of a wart on the diaphragm reflex on the left side, but not enough for me to not make the following statement. So this person has had a lot of trauma, but is currently in the process of releasing all of that trauma. So there is movement from one side to the other. And when we see issues on the right side but not on the left, what that means is this person has had that stress but is in the process of releasing it. Now, the fact that that stress has even showed up in the first place on the right side means that it's still being physically and mentally and emotionally held within the body. So the stress hasn't been completely released, and we definitely will incorporate that into our final kind of analysis and methods of balancing. But not as dramatic stuff on the left side lets me know that yes, things are moving, and that's always a good thing. Okay, so putting it all together, let's talk about this. So physically, the headspace is physically and internally out of balance, and it is currently undergoing major construction. When you talk about tempering your words, and when I make the suggestion that you don't say things like, this client has mental trauma, not only for scope of practice, but also for just making sure that the client doesn't look at you like you have 6 heads, you know? A lot of clients can empathize with the statement, you know, your headspace is undergoing major construction, both physically and mentally and emotionally. There's just a lot happening there that continues to need to happen there because you've gone through a lot, you know, and acknowledging that. If I were to say that to a client in their face, like knowing what their feet are telling me and they know what they've been through, at that statement alone, like the tears would start to come out. And we could definitely let that be part of the experience. But this sentence is benign enough to where, especially since this is a younger set of feet, if they wanted to stonewall me, if they wanted to like not confirm anything, they know that I know what I'm talking about just by this clear-cut statement, but I'm not being as cutting and sharp with my words, which is important. Okay. Internally, deeper traumas are needing to be sifted and sorted. Okay. So we talked about the headspace is under construction, both physically and mentally and emotionally. But then when we think about the internal component, the reason why the headspace is under construction is because of the emotional impact and the lingering emotional stuff that's being bottled up and not released. Okay. So we're talking about the headspace, but then we immediately take it to that internal space and saying, but there are deeper issues that need to be released on an emotional level specifically. And that can also, tell the client, hey, this is where you might be feeling symptoms. This is where the stress might have initially hit. But the reason why it's sticking around and where you really need to dig up and excavate some of these stressors is going to be in the heart space, and we'll definitely use our methods of balancing wisely for that as well. Okay, so let's talk about methods of balancing. At the end of this consultation, I would say, the work is already underway, but lingering earth stagnation remains. Now, earth stagnation is a really interesting phrase because it's a very clinical term that I teach to my students, but it's not something that normally flies with clients. So I would just say stagnant. I wouldn't specifically call it elemental earth stagnation, but just, for foot reading purposes, you could either choose to temper or not temper your words, depending on if you feel it's appropriate. Sometimes you want to impress your clients and sometimes you want to, level with them. So it just depends. Now is the time to investigate deeper levels of mental emotional expansion, air, so balancing earth with air, to help let go of old patterns before they set in too deeply. Craniosacral therapy would be excellent. Why would craniosacral therapy be excellent? Because of all of the crap that we're seeing in horizontal zone 1. Now, not to say crap, but to say coagulation, So there's just so much with the callusing bilaterally on both sides, also representing that occiput. Like, we need to unwind the headspace. And that's priority number 1. But then also that black and blue like damage to the big toenail, that's really significant too. So we potentially might have some vascular sinus fluid issues on that right side of the head that need to be addressed. And again, craniosacral therapy would be excellent for that. In addition to more restorative yoga that is able to invert the headspace, poses like down dog, legs up the wall, full fold, and bridge. Now, why restorative yoga and not regular yoga? So this person has been through stress. And the last thing you want to do with a stressed out person is to put more stress on them. So doing gentle yoga as opposed to just walking into a normal, like, quote unquote yoga class and they're going through multiple vinyasas or flows, or doing a power class or a hot class, or God forbid, like a Bikram class. I mean, yes, it might help to release some of those stagnant emotions, but I mean, you really want to approach somebody with this much built up really slow and steady. So nice, calming, relaxing, restorative yoga that has inversions. So what inversions are is actually putting the heart above the head or at level with the head. So in the example of down dog, you are physically bowing forward and the heart is above the head. Legs up the wall, where you actually use a wall and put your legs vertically up it, drains the fluid pressure from the legs and helps to circulate all of that core fluid. Then full fold does the same thing. You're literally folding forward, putting the heart above the head, and then bridge does the same thing, lifting the core above the extremities. So all of those physical yoga postures would really help to circulate some of that stagnant fluid. And also, yoga is all about the breath. Yoga is all about meditative practice. Yoga is all about releasing and shifting and moving from shape to shape. So all of those kind of subtler lessons peppered in there would really help with this person to, as a method of balancing, to really help them release some of that physical and internal stagnation that we're seeing. So the goal is to physically, internally air out the closets of the mind. Do you like how I said that? Like, that would definitely be how I would speak to a client. We are airing out the closets of the mind and the heart to continue facilitating what is already underway. And that last part is so important as well, because you want to affirm that the person is processing their stuff, especially in this case where it's true. But even in a case where it might not be true, you never want to accuse a client like you're not doing enough. That's very harsh language, especially with somebody who has incurred some sort of major stressor. So we really want to make sure that we're unpacking them lightly and applauding them for the unpacking that they've already done on their own, right? Yeah. So that is putting it all together, and those are the methods of balancing. If you all on the chat have any other questions, please feel free to ask them, and I will wrap up this video just with a little bit of that's it. Thank you very much. So remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're really getting hot with a lot of the webinars. We have a webinar coming up this Sunday. I know it's Super Bowl, but I'm not going to watch the freaking Super Bowl. So if you're nerdy like me and prefer anatomy to football, then you could totally watch the webinar with me on fertility, pregnancy, and children in reflexology. It's going to be absolutely fascinating here on the YouTube channel. Then join the Facebook group. So if you're not already a member of the FROC group, the Foot Reading and Reflexology Online Community group on Facebook, lots of stuff happening there. Would love to see you on there. Oh, Christopher says, you're my hero, Sam. Stop. You're going to make me cry. Do you have a book with all this juicy information? Adam, yes, I do. You can buy the book. You can totally buy the book. The book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It is entitled Foot Reading, a Reflexology Primer on Foot Assessment. Again, that's Foot Reading, a Reflexology Primer on Foot Assessment. And you can, like, I know a bunch of people in the Facebook group just got their copies in the mail, so you'll see pictures of it in the Facebook group. And if you just search my name, Sam Bellier, it'll come up on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all that jazz. Also, if you personally or friends or family of yours anywhere in the world need a foot reading consultation, I do Skype consultations. They are available. I am available for purchase, as it were, for half-hour, hour and a half consultations via Skype, where we can discuss the various nuances of your feet. And you can always do that via my website, footwhisperer.com. All of that is available on the website. And stay tuned. We have so much more happening. Lots of foot reading challenges, more feet to be discussed. And I look forward to being there every step of the way as we continue this fabulous journey into the amazing world of foot reading and reflexology. So that is that. Let me flip around my screen real quick and we will chat. So thank you all so much, both Chris and Adam, who are super active in the chat, and everybody who watched but was not so active in the chat. I appreciate you watching, and all of those who are watching post-live discussion. Continue, share, like, put more comments in. I'll answer them. It's just me answering questions because this is what I do for a living. So I look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you all so much, and peace out. I'll see you later.